I remember vividly meeting him for a working session in January 24. And he said, look, even though it is not in my interest, I am willing to help a Democratic president to bring out the hostages out. The way to do it is to bring Saudi normalization together, understanding that in order to get the normalization in place, there was a need to get a Saudi defense agreement. And he believed that the best way to move that defense agreement forward was with a Democratic majority and the Republicans supporting from the outside, understanding that if it was a Republican-led initiative, it would be very difficult to pass. And he said, I'm willing to help a Democratic president because I understand the magnitude of the fact that there are 250 hostages, including 10 U.S. citizens that we need to get out as soon as possible. And I think we will always cherish the fact that the senator was willing to do what was good, regardless of partisan issues, and doing what was needed to allow us to be whole as soon as possible.
And I mean, obviously, you had a very personal experience with Senator Graham. For those that never met him, never worked with him, what do you hope the senator's legacy is?
So I believe his legacy is still not completed, and he very much wanted to see the economic integration happening in the Middle East, where Israel is part of these large infrastructure projects that would prevent new cycles of violence to happen. And I very much hope that when the president meets the prime minister tomorrow, that one of the questions that he will ask him is, what are you, Mr. Prime Minister, willing to do to make Lindsey's legacy a reality? And having the prime minister speak out publicly and saying what he is willing to do if he is reelected to bring the Abraham Accords forward and to make sure that Senator Graham's legacy is indeed becomes a reality. I think that would be the best thing that I think we should see coming out of the meeting between the president and the prime minister.
Ruby, stand by for just a moment, because I want to bring in CBS News' Torian Small, who is on Capitol Hill. Torian, one of the questions that we asked Aaron McLean, is Torian, okay. One of the questions that we asked Aaron McLean earlier this morning was about the style in which Lindsey Graham interfaced with the President of the United States, which was kind of a throwback. There was a time when the Republican Party was staunchly anti-Russian, staunchly anti-Vladimir Putin. But in recent years, we've seen, perhaps as the party has moved towards a non-interventionist mood and characteristic, that Lindsey Graham was kind of a voice in the wilderness, someone who continued to argue for a robust foreign policy strategy that perhaps in some cases would require the use of the United States military. What are you hearing from leaders on the Hill about who will perhaps fill that void?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, it's not just Republican members of Congress who adopted that anti-interventionalist or non-interventionalist style when it comes to these foreign conflicts. It was pretty typical of the Trump 2024 campaign to preach about no longer joining these forever wars and, you know, keeping the U.S. out of those conflicts. So Lindsey Graham's approach really was antithetical to the part of the reason why Donald Trump was reelected to serve as president of the United States. I think what we're seeing, though, is that connective tissue that is so crucial between Senate and the White House that Graham served in that role, partly because his hawkish ideas on war and, you know, delivering peace through strength as a key tool of the United States when it comes to foreign intervention, but also just because of his long storied relationship with President Trump. When President Trump ran in 2026, Lindsey Graham was one of the biggest anti-Trumpers, but he quickly made an about-face once it became clear he was going to become the nominee. And then the two have developed this really chummy relationship, which best served the president in getting his legislative agenda across the finish line here on Capitol Hill. I think now we're looking at potential replacements and who's the closest to the president in light of Graham's absence. And so far, what we've heard for weeks now is that that's a sorely missed spot, typically one filled by the vice president, as we saw under Obama's administration. That was Joe Biden, who was serving as that key negotiator between folks here and down Pennsylvania Avenue. So we'll see who steps up. But it's clear that President Trump has some issues with Majority Leader John Thune, so he clearly wouldn't take up that role. But we'll have to see a number of other potentially far-right members like Rick Scott of Florida, Ron Johnson potentially of Wisconsin. Those two have come forth as anti-Thune and more so in line with President Trump's America First agenda.
All right, Torian Small reporting from Capitol Hill. Torian, thank you very much. We also thank Aidan Stretch reporting from London for us, and of course, Ruby Kane. Thank you very much, all of you. We'll continue to follow the coverage of Senator Lindsey Graham as his hearse makes its way there to the Capitol, and we will bring you those funeral services, which are scheduled to begin at about 2 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. Okay, breaking overnight, a powerful earthquake has struck southern Japan, reportedly injuring dozens of people. The quake measured a magnitude 7.1. That's according to Japan's Meteorological Agency, collapsing buildings and sparking fires in the area. CBS News foreign correspondent Raymond Asensio is tracking the story from London.
Yes, a strong magnitude 7.1 quake rocked Japan's southernmost island of Kyushu. This hit about 6 miles deep, which is shallow and which can mean more destruction. And this happened just before 4:30 this afternoon, local time, just as rush hour was getting going. The damage we're seeing is mounting. An explosion happened at a shopping mall called the Aeon Mall. Its second floor collapsed, and that trapped many people. And a police source told CBS News Japan partner TBS that there are numerous deaths at the Aeon Mall and that it will take time to confirm just how many. In other damage, at least 2 buildings caught fire. A train also derailed, and thousands of homes and families are now in the dark tonight, local time, without power. Earlier, tsunami warnings were issued, and officials warned people to brace for waves up to 3 feet, but that has now been lifted. And we are also looking at the number of casualties and the number of injuries rise. We do know at this point that about 50 people have been taken to the hospital, and officials have warned of more aftershocks to come. Back to you.
All right, hundreds of thousands of people are waking up with power in the Midwest after the latest barrage of extreme storms. I want you to check out this intense dash cam footage. This is out of Wisconsin. Meteorologists confirmed a tornado did touch down there. Powerful winds tore down trees and power lines all around that driver, who you can see narrowly avoided a head-on collision. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen has the latest from Menasha, Wisconsin this morning.
A dashboard camera captured the moment a dangerous tornado sent tree limbs flying across the road and power poles falling, trapping a driver southwest of Green Bay, Wisconsin. Another video shows debris flying across a backyard.
It's definitely a tornado.
We should go to the basement. The tornado blasted through neighborhoods, packing winds more than 110 miles an hour.
I still in shock. Like, this is traumatizing. I feel like we should have died, but we didn't.
Ripping roofs and walls off of homes, uprooting trees and leaving piles of debris littered across yards.
The window had basically caved in the living room, and then me and my children went down to the basement from there.
The same twister flipped this car over onto its roof, this pickup onto its side, and sent this tractor trailer over the median of a nearby highway. It's one of a string of tornadoes that caused destruction across the Midwest Monday. Damaging winds also slammed the Chicago area, gusting up to 74 miles an hour.
We screamed and we ran in the bathroom. This was end of days bad.
Another suspected tornado snapped trees and toppled power lines south of the Windy City, also ripping the roof off this business.
It was like somebody just took their hand, went to the gutter, and just peeled it back.
And falling debris shattered car windows in the parking lot. The same storm system also caused flash floods. Parts of the Chicago suburbs got up to 4 inches of rain. 2 contractors were stuck in a storm sewer. One of them was rescued. The other is still missing.
Just getting around the area right now is difficult. There are power lines that are down everywhere. There's major power poles that have fallen in the front yards of houses. And while the cleanup just really gets underway here today, the extreme severe weather threat starts to move toward the East Coast. Jason Allen, CBS News, Menasha, Wisconsin.
All right, CBS News meteorologist Rob Marciano is here with a look at the forecast. Hey, Rob.
Some of those images are just stunning. I mean, the video with the telephone poles coming down, and then just what's behind Jason looks like something out of a movie set. Unbelievable. And this all happened like around midday yesterday, which is unusual. It's unusual for that to happen in summer, and then to be that early in the day. A lot of strong atmospherics that were coming down the I-41 corridor at the time. It's quiet there now, thankfully. But that action has now moved into the northeast and eventually into the Carolinas as well. This isn't necessarily severe, but it's dumping some heavy rain in some spots. And because of that, flash flood warnings have been posted just to the west of Charleston. The heaviest rain has moved out of that area. And we're looking for the heavier rains now to begin to focus on really New York Metro, Philly, Baltimore, back through Harrisburg, up through Hartford over the next 36 hours. Really, it's going to be pretty intense here. This will begin really in earnest later this afternoon through this evening. I think the evening commute is going to be a bit of a pain in some of the bigger cities. And then south from Philly back through Charlotte, this is where the atmospherics are such that we might see some severe storms like we saw yesterday. Probably not tornadoes like that, but certainly straight line winds that could be gusting over 60 miles an hour with an isolated tornado or two, possibly. And that low kind of sits up there right over the northeast here over the next couple of days, and that's going to create the heavier rainfalls. The heat is on and continues to be on across the midsection of the country from Dallas to Jackson, Mississippi, up through Memphis. That's where the extreme heat warnings are posted. It looks like they slid some into the I-10 corridor down there from Mobile east to Tallahassee and out towards Phoenix. Phoenix and Vegas, I know it's supposed to be hot out there, but they've been in warnings, it seems like, on and off for about a month, so it's been a pretty toasty. We'll discuss it more in earnest and how much rain you two will endure, because I know that's a top
Got to
priority.
get out as soon as the show's over, heading home, because it's apparently flash flood warnings.
Oh, yeah. Last night, my dog and I got in right before it hit. You could hear the thunder rumbling.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, Vicky, come on.
You got to get out there. And, of course, that's the moment where he's like, you know what? I'm going to just sniff every pole and every bush that I see
Let them eat
in a
cake
5-mile
and
radius.
let them sniff.
Exactly.
You're a dog, for sure.
All right,
Thanks, Rob.
Okay.
All right, coming up, President Biden, in his own words, what he said in nearly 70 hours of audio recordings about his handling of classified documents. This is CBS News 24/7 Mornings.
The only way to get a 360-degree understanding of America is to get out there in America. There really is no swing at all when it comes to the priorities of everyday people. We care about how secure our job is, whether we can plan on retiring with dignity, whether our kids can have a brighter future than we have today. These are the fundamentals of American life, and I think they can be again.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
We don't want to accept that there's evil that walks amongst us, but it does.
You know how when you meet somebody, you can't put your finger on it, but something's not right?
You never know what anybody is capable of.
I am a serial killer who's only killed once.
Did you think when this goes public, this town's gonna be shocked?
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with a 30-year-old cold case, it seems like there's not a lot of hope.
We knew there was a monster out there and we were going to find him and get him.
Look at him just coming around the corner like that.
We started tracking the area.
When did this accident scene become a crime scene?
Police! You called him a lying liar who lies about lying.
Do you know why we're stopping you today?
What makes you so sure that you stabbed your sister while you were sleepwalking?
I never got a chance to see her one last time.
Such injustice. I can't believe they did this to her.
But no matter how hard it gets, never give up.
I'm Natalie Morales with 48 Hours. Did you have anything to do with Joanna Hunter's death?
This is a family that just wants justice.
I'm Tony DeCopel from a region at war tonight.
To tell the story,
Hello up there.
you have to be there, seeing it firsthand.
I'm Tony. I work for CBS.
Can you clarify what this war is about? How do you avoid this becoming a death trap?
This war only seems to be accelerating.
The CBS Evening News with Tony DeCopel.
First on CBS, former President Biden is facing new criticism this morning over newly released audio tapes from his conversations with his ghostwriter. Now, these are the same tapes referenced in former special counsel Robert Hur's investigation. CBS News poured through more than 2 hours of the recordings that were shared. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang has the latest.
Some of this may be classified, so be careful with.
The newly released audio recordings reveal that in 2016 and 2017, as then former Vice President Biden was writing a memoir, he told his ghostwriter Mark Zwanitzer on several occasions that he had classified documents in his possession. Biden said this in reference to volumes of notes he kept in his home.
I just found all the classified stuff downstairs.
Biden would later publicly criticize President Trump for his handling of classified material after classified documents were discovered at Mar-a-Lago.
How that could possibly happen, how anyone could be that irresponsible.
The Biden tapes were first referenced by special counsel Robert Hur in a 2024 report that summarized Hur's investigation of Biden's handling of classified materials after classified documents were found in Biden's home and private office. As part of the probe, Hur interviewed Biden in 2022 and ultimately did not recommend charges, in part arguing the jury would not convict, likely viewing Biden as, quote, a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Hur described Biden in these older audio recordings as exhibiting, quote, diminished faculties.
I was going to ask you something else. Oh, gosh. I can't think what it is.
President Biden had previously denied sharing classified information with his ghostwriter. A spokesman told us, quote, President Biden's conversations for a book a decade ago that discussed his late son are private and were provided to the Department of Justice on the express condition they stay that way. Reversing course and making them public is just the latest example of this administration's weaponizing the DOJ for political retribution. Now, joining us this morning to discuss is Jaime Moore, a former DNC staffer who's currently serving as a principal at Cornerstone Government Affairs. Appreciate you coming on. So let's just start broad. You know, what were your reactions when you learned these tapes were finally out there? What are you hearing from other folks inside the party?
Kelly, Vlad, good to see you. Look, I'm hearing two things from inside the party right now, Democrats across the country. There's immense sort of gratitude for Joe Biden and his service, his 50 years of service. But also, I think Democrats right now in the middle of this election, looking back to last year and how that went, I think Democrats would like to see President Biden sort of take the back seat or even exit the stage right now, particularly around the midterms and as we get into the 2028 election. But this further underscores, I think, for a lot of Democrats, why Joe Biden should have never stood for re-election and why Kamala Harris should have had more than 107 days to run for president.
So what's your take on the actual recordings? I mean, it struck me in listening, and I haven't listened as much as perhaps you have or our investigative team, but there was little sort of news value to them. It's one thing when we go back and we listen to presidential tapes, for example, there are tapes that exist of President Kennedy discussing the Cuban Missile Crisis. There are tapes, obviously, of President Nixon, conducting business that ultimately the Senate and the Congress deemed to be corrupt. When there's some kind of value in these presidential tapes, but at this point, it just sort of feels like this was released and there's some interesting nuggets in there, but nothing really earth-shattering about how the president was doing and conducting himself on behalf of the American people.
Yeah, Vlad, I think you're right. There's no real there. as it stands. And I think the spokesperson said they've been very transparent, which I think a lot of Democrats are appreciative of. But here's the thing. As you're running elections, and you saw President Biden use this as a wedge issue with President Trump, he is now, we're seeing two things. One, that he did have classified information. He shared it with his ghostwriter. But more sadly, he was having memory loss. He was having these issues sort of early on. And so I think Democrats looking back and having some sadness around how President Biden's presidency ended is a feeling I see coming up. But I don't think anyone, Democrats, Republicans right now think that Joe Biden did anything that was nefarious or he intended to do anything that was criminal. And so I think this was just one of those things where it was a mistake and it was really, really bad. And it just looks poorly and it gives more fodder for this conversation.
Well, I suppose hindsight is always 20/20. Ivan Moore, appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Thank you, Kelly.
Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci is set to testify on Capitol Hill tomorrow about the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Ahead of the hearing, Republican Senator Rand Paul released more than 1,000 pages of journal entries from the nation's former top infectious disease expert. The Kentucky lawmaker is accusing Fauci of being dishonest with the public about how the pandemic started. Fauci has not responded to a request for comment from CBS News. Yesterday, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, who's on the committee that Fauci will testify before tomorrow, appeared on The Takeout. He told Major Garrett that Americans were deceived by Dr. Fauci.
Imagine I'm a constituent of yours, Senator Johnson, and I ask you this question. Shouldn't we be more concerned about China than Anthony Fauci? Don't they have blood on their hands that is as more apparent than Anthony Fauci or anyone who funded any gain-of-function research?
I'm not holding China harmless here. But again, it's Anthony Fauci that covered this. And if we don't hold these people accountable, they'll do it again. You can see them trying to do it with what's monkeypox or this hantavirus, or it's another bird flu, whether it's Ebola. They create fear so that they can force these countermeasures on us. It's a ruse that I think created a pandemic that ended up killing millions of people.
And you can read more of our reporting on what's in Dr. Fauci's diaries at cbsnews.com.
Hundreds of thousands of Haitian immigrants are now living in fear as the Trump administration moves to deport them. We're hearing from Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, who's a Republican and who tells CBS News mass deportations would hurt his state's economy. CBS News immigration correspondent Camila Montoyo-Gavaz is in Ohio talking to the people at risk.
We've been praying for the best, but now we are facing the worst.
Vilas Dorsonville runs a support center for Haitians here in Springfield, Ohio. He's one of many Haitian immigrants on the verge of losing their legal protections to live and work in the U.S. after a Supreme Court ruling went into effect on Monday, allowing officials to end a federal program called Temporary Protected Status for more than 300,000 Haitians.
It will be a nightmare for us.
Now, sources inside ICE tell CBS News the agency is planning a round of operations targeting Haitian immigrants, starting as soon as this week.
Well, it's a mistake. It's not good for the United States, and it's not good for the state of Ohio.
Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine says Haitian immigrants have contributed to the state's economic growth, filling and creating many jobs.
Look, we have a right to control our border. That's not an issue. I think the question really is deporting maybe 1 million, 2 million, whatever the number is going to be, is that really in our best interest? Is that what we want? I just don't think it's in our national interest to do that.
In Ohio, ICE sources tell CBS News the agency plans to deport Haitian immigrants directly back to their home country, where widespread gang violence has fueled a dire humanitarian crisis.
Haiti is hell today. So you'd be sending people back, literally back to hell.
People are scared.
They are very scared because they saw what was happening in Minneapolis. And now they're afraid that that same scenario will be happening here in Springfield.
Faced with the prospect of being deported to crisis-stricken Haiti, community leaders here in Springfield tell us that some Haitians are thinking of going to Canada or other countries around the globe. But they tell us that is also difficult to do legally. Camilo Montoya-Galvez, CBS News, Springfield, Ohio.
All right, in minutes, President Trump meets with Ukraine's President Zelensky at the White House. We'll go there live with a look at what both sides are hoping to get out of today's face-to-face. This is CBS News 24/7 Mornings.
Diaz.
And I'm Kelly O'Grady.
Join us right here
For the perfect start to your weekend.
Watch CBS Saturday morning.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Sunday morning, Lauren Hutton's Lucky Life. We'll dig into worm grunting and hear new music from Corinne Bailey Ray. Listen for the trumpet.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and I want to tell you about my new podcast, Healthful. Every week, I bring you the latest science, Dr. Brem, myth-busting, and trusted medical expertise
Perimenopause is hormonal chaos. We have biology to help you not suffer.
to help you improve your health, your happiness. This is like such an aha moment, and just to improve your life. I think talking about this is so incredibly important. Healthful, a new CBS News podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Why doesn't he tell Republicans, come into my office, let's hammer this thing out?
Margaret, it's a totally fair question.
Politics isn't a game. Why are you opposed to this deployment?
It's unconstitutional.
Politics is about policy. I'm a voracious consumer of information, and I'm impatient. I don't like to be spun. To be moderator of Face the Nation means bringing the most powerful stakeholders to the table to become better informed.
Eric Richins was found dead in his home.
The family had been alerted by Eric that if something happened to him, to look at Corey.
Why would Corey Richins want her husband dead? What jurors on the case say led to their verdict.
I was like, seriously? Now we've seen just about everything in this trial.
48 Hours, now streaming on CBS and Paramount Plus.
I'm Tony DeCopel. The CBS Evening News is the story of America one day at a time. I'm Tony. Success for us is not how much we pack into a show, but how much you take away from it. So join me. This is the CBS Evening News.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington, inviting you to the Takeout. Politics, policy, people, and pop culture served up weeknights. What's on the menu? Plenty. The day's happenings with curiosity, informality, and humor. It's serious discussion, but we do not take ourselves too seriously. Who is a better speaker, Mike Johnson or you? Oh, come on. Join me on the Takeout. Streaming right here on CBS News 24/7.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7 Mornings.
Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following. In minutes, the ceremony will begin on Capitol Hill for the late Lindsey Graham. We're going to take you there live.
And high-stakes White House meetings. President Trump gets ready to go face-to-face with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky this hour and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shortly after. What both of those critical meetings will entail.
Plus,
go for it,
new information about the shooting of the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator's wife as investigators look for a possible motive behind her son's actions. All right, in minutes, President Trump is set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. Before the meeting, Zelensky said his number one priority was Kyiv's anti-ballistic defense and finding a path to peace. Well, later this morning, President Trump will also meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the war with Iran drags on. CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. Olivia, so let's start with Zelensky. It's interesting, about a year ago, as you recall, maybe you were in the Oval Office on that day when President Zelensky was castigated by the president and Vice President Vance, along with the Secretary of State, who actually didn't say anything and thus became a meme. But he was almost sort of persona non grata for a little while after that meeting. But now it feels as if the president and President Zelensky have come to an agreement of terms or to an agreement of sorts as it relates to prosecuting this war. So let's talk about that. What are both sides hoping to get out of this meeting?
Yeah, they do have a little bit more of a rapport now between those two leaders. They met pretty recently, too, on the sidelines of the G7 about a month ago in Geneva. So the conversation between the two of them has become better than what we had seen in that Oval Office meeting. I believe it was in February of 2025, so about a year and a half ago at this point. And if you'll remember, it was around this time last summer that President Trump was trying to end the war in Ukraine. He was courting both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. That then led to that summit in Alaska between the president and Putin. But since then, the war really has somewhat expanded in Ukraine. You're seeing Russia target Kyiv with these very intense missile strikes throughout the evening, throughout the nights. But you're also seeing Ukraine do long-range missile strikes into Russia. So this conflict has continued to spiral. And the president, despite all of the history there between him and President Zelensky, really has kind of taken to the relationship with the two of them, between President Zelensky and President Trump. And we saw Zelensky, when he landed yesterday, say that one of the main goals of this meeting that they're about to have any minute now at the White House behind me is really going to be their anti-ballistic defense systems because of those increased Russian attacks. The Ukrainians are feeling quite good about where they are in this war, about their drone capabilities, about what's happening on the front lines and their ability to stave off the Russians. But they do need more help at this point. And so that's going to be part of the goal today when Zelensky comes here. He's been building this relationship with President Trump, and now it's time for some of the big asks, which include those Patriot missiles and those ballistic defense missiles. And of course, I'd be remiss to not mention that the U.S. is running low on those Patriot missiles. Some of our own reporting has suggested that the U.S. ability to combat anti-aircraft missiles with the Patriot defense missiles has become a difficulty with the war in Iran. So it's certainly something they're going to have to discuss today.
Yeah, Ukraine has had a decent few months against Russia, and I thought it was good, your conversation this morning, Vlad, with Aaron McLean, CBS News contributor, about the shift in tone in their relationship. The president likes winners, and so that might have something to do with it.
Yes.
I liked his statement there. Olivia, while we have you, President Trump is also going to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. After that meeting, the two leaders haven't always seen eye to eye, of course, when it comes to the Iran war. What can we expect there?
Yeah, this is actually their first in-person meeting since the war in Iran began. They have met in person about 7 times now since President Trump took office about a year and a half ago in January 2025. So this is yet the latest meeting between the two of them, but make no mistake, this meeting is going to be different today because the relationship between these two leaders has gotten quite contentious. And even this morning, President Trump was on Fox News and he was talking about his relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And when discussing that, he kind of aired out perhaps a little grievance between the two of them. Take a listen here.
Well, I don't need Bibi to tell me that. Bibi's telling me that because he wants me to stay involved. I mean, I don't necessarily. We have the finest, because of Space Force, we have the greatest cameras in the world focused on. We know exactly what's going on. But, no, I heard Bibi announce that. I said, why didn't you just tell it to me? Why do you have to announce it to the world? I know exactly what's going on at Pickaxe. It's not a big problem.
Now, when he was talking there, it was about Pickaxe Mountain, which is a nuclear facility inside of Iran. It's a huge mountain that there is some concern about, that it would have some perhaps nuclear material or educational purposes for the Iranian nuclear program. And the U.S. has not struck Pickaxe Mountain throughout this entire war, but Netanyahu's had suggested that perhaps that could be something that the U.S. would do next, that there is perhaps some nefarious activity with the Iranian nuclear program happening there. The president, though, this morning on Fox News very publicly saying, why would he say that publicly? Why wouldn't he just tell that to me instead of announcing it to the world? So you can still see the tinges of conflict between these two leaders, even as they are set to meet today in person. This was certainly a meeting that Prime Minister Netanyahu worked pretty hard for. We were told that he had tried to come to the White House numerous times. It kept getting pushed off, but now with the funeral of Lindsey Graham happening today, the late senator, Netanyahu's in town for that. He is staying here on White House grounds at Blair House, which is also quite notable given the fact that there were two leaders coming here today. between Zelensky and Netanyahu of who would get the coveted spot at Blair House. It went to Netanyahu. So it is interesting seeing this relationship play out in real time, seeing how they are trying to handle this between the two of them. So we'll have to see just the results of this meeting today, if there's any announcement that would come out of it.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi reporting from the White House for us. Olivia, thank you. Well, this morning, police are still searching for one of the 3 suspects involved in a deadly shooting at a Seattle food festival. Officials say one suspect was killed during the shooting Sunday night. It sparked chaos during a food festival near the city's iconic Space Needle. A second suspect was arrested and was apparently just 15 years old. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans has more from Seattle and joins us now. So, Carter, what do we know at this time about the search for this third suspect?
Well, you know, it's interesting because initially after the shooting, police and the mayor and city officials said that there were 2 suspects and that they were shooting at each other. It only came out in court documents yesterday that police believe there was a third suspect involved. And in fact, the second suspect was one of the victims that had been shot and killed. Now, I got to point out that at this point, city officials here think that this was gang-related shooting. This was at a food festival, thousands of people there, and gunfire erupted in the middle of the festival. Apparently, 2 rival gang members shooting at each other. 2 of them, actually, though, 3 of them, 2 of them were together, and one of those gang members was killed. They found 2 guns at the scene, and initially, I think that's why they thought that there were 2 individuals, but it turns out that there was a third one that got away, and police are still looking for that suspect right now.
And Carter, do we know any more about the conditions of the shooting victims beyond the suspect that you mentioned?
You know, many of them have been treated and released from the hospital, treated for gunshot wounds, that is, and one of them was a 2-year-old boy. There were some alarming radio calls that went out during the shooting as police were looking for a child-sized tourniquet. I mean, imagine hearing that. The parents were apparently beside themselves, but that little boy was taken to the hospital, and he's now doing pretty well along with the other remaining victims.
All right, Carter Evans reporting from Seattle for us. Carter, thank you.
Well, the Midwest is cleaning up from a barrage of extreme weather. A tornado in Wisconsin left behind extensive damage and cut power to thousands of homes. Look at this dash cam video of a tornado hitting near Green Bay. One driver was actually trapped before escaping. Now, this was the damage from another suspected tornado in the suburbs of Chicago. Now, that area was also slammed by thunderstorms. Hundreds of thousands are still without power. Just absolutely incredible, the damage that we're seeing here.
Yeah, CBS News meteorologist Rob Marciano is here with a look at the forecast. Rob, I did see an email from the weather team with you replying to some video, and it was like, this video is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, was that what we saw earlier?
I don't reply all on purpose usually.
No, it's good for us to know what you guys are what you're working on.
Yeah, no, when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Someone did get hurt, but nobody was killed.
Okay, well, that's good news.
It was a crazy day yesterday for sure. Let's go through some of that. You guys highlighted some of the video and some of the talking points. Cook County getting a lot of those power outages because of that wind damage, and they're pretty much north central Wisconsin down I-41. And then right through Chicago, or just the west of Chicago, and then getting out into Illinois and Indiana. And then the wind reports down there. We also had the I-95 corridor had some stuff happening. And we look for seeing a high risk of seeing some flooding in this area, which I've been saying this a lot for different areas. These areas need the rain, and then we're also in the flood zone. So feast or famine, take the good with the bad, I guess. So just be ready for a little bit of rain over the next 36 hours.
All right, we'll be watching. Rob, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're showing you live pictures right now on Capitol Hill, the ceremony for the late Senator Lindsey Graham. The live pictures from Capitol Hill that I just... Okay, there we go. I want to bring in Torian Small, our CBS News reporter who's on Capitol Hill and joins us now to talk about what we will see today. Torian, walk us through what the ceremony will look like. We know that there's one today in Washington, D.C., and then there will be another one much later in the next couple of days in his home state.
Yeah, so what we're seeing happen in just a few moments, I'm going to look down because I'm keeping an eye on the screen. Once that hearse pulls up, he'll be transported inside of the Capitol where he would lie in honor. Since he served in the U.S. Armed Forces, he would be carried as part of tribute to that service to the country. And then there'll be a changeover with U.S. Capitol Police to then also pay tribute in a way to his long service as a lawmaker on Capitol Hill. What happens later, though, there will be a ceremony here as he lies in honor. He'll likely receive tributes from some of his colleagues here. But then around 2 o'clock, he'll be headed to the American Cathedral, where a much larger but closed-door ceremony will happen for him. That's where we're expected to hear from President Trump, who will be delivering a eulogy for his friend and the late Senator Lindsey Graham. That's also where we know President Volodymyr Zelensky and Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, would also be attending that festivity.
And Torian, just for some context, I mean, why is lying in state, on Capitol Hill such a very symbolic moment for someone like Graham?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tribute to the service one person has made to this country. I should note a slight distinction here. He'll be lying in honor, not necessarily lying in state. Lying in state is typically for higher dignitaries, presidents, for example, vice presidents, etc. But somewhat similar in its distinguished honor for, again, this person's service to the country. I think undoubtedly, though, we've heard week over week just the great loss this is for a number of lawmakers. Just days after, or moments after his passing, his seat on the Senate floor was draped in black. He had flowers there to pay tribute to him. Outside of his office was this memorial of sorts built up with notes, cards, flowers from his friends and colleagues. It is a great loss, again, to many lawmakers. And his sister, Darlene Graham, has taken his place as his appointed replacement by the governor. And as we know, since then, she's announced that she'll be running to permanently replace him on the November ballot, since he was up for re-election this year as well.
All right, Torian, stand by as we look at the live pictures coming into the newsroom of the hearse carrying the late Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, to Washington, where he served for so many years as a senator from the state of South Carolina. Let's bring back CBS News international reporter Aidan Stretch. He is joining us now from London. Aidan, as Kelly pointed out earlier, Senator Graham had just returned from a visit to Ukraine, and soon afterwards he died. I want to talk to you about what his intention was on that trip, because one of the things that he was known for is continuing to bend the president's ear as it relates to the war between Ukraine and Russia. There had been times when the president seemed to, I don't want to suggest that the president was taking the side of Vladimir Putin, but there were often times when the president made statements to the press and to the American people that perhaps Ukraine would be better off in ceding some of the territory that the Russians had gained over the course of this now almost 4-year war. And Lindsey Graham was somebody who fought vociferously against that notion. So talk to me about what he was doing on that latest trip.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Vlad. I mean, one of the things he was particularly good at was coming to President Trump and framing Ukraine's cause in relationship to the U.S. in a way that he could understand. So he would say things like, Ukraine can help the United States with its war in Iran, with its drone technology. He was a great communicator of the Ukrainian cause to President Trump, but he was also making material progress on things that are very important to Ukrainians. So most importantly, he had for over a year been pushing home the Graham-Blumenthal sanctions bill, which was supposed to impose harsher penalties on countries like China and India that purchase Russian energy. And what he was doing on that that trip was both letting President Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials know that that bill had received President Trump's blessing and would hopefully soon become law. And everything we've heard from both the American side and the Ukrainians is that's still expected to happen, and that bill will hopefully, for the Ukrainians, come to a vote early next week. And so that will be, you've spoken about how important Senator Graham was as both an advisor to President Trump on Ukraine and also a symbolic voice for Ukraine. But something that the Ukrainians always say is sort of, what is the material help that you're giving me? Well, this sanctions bill that will impose harsher penalties on purchasers of Russian energy is that material gain that they're always looking for. And they're expecting that this will soon become law as early as next week.
Perhaps that proposed sanction legislation, some of his most consequential unfinished work. Aidan, we've been talking about this. President Volodymyr Zelensky meeting with President Trump, but then will also be attending these services. How significant is it that Zelensky is here to honor Senator Graham?
Well, I think, it is significant that he's there to honor Senator Graham. I mean, he's in the middle of a war, and he's taking the time to come honor him, right? So that should tell you something about how significant the senator is, both to him and to his country. He's seen also, I should say, not only by President Zelensky, but advisors around him. The Ukrainian people know who he is. He's traveled to Ukraine, as I said earlier, 10 times since the full-scale invasion. He was seen as somebody who was a big supporter of Ukrainian sovereignty since the 2014 annexation of Crimea. And so, of course, President Zelensky's here to honor that legacy, somebody who was a great friend of Ukraine. But he's also here, and he's going to have a meeting with President Trump at a moment when Ukraine seems to be much more in President Trump's good books than they have recently. We've seen both drone technology and operators sent to the Middle East to help defend American military bases. We've seen on Ukraine's home front more strikes into Russia, which President Trump has openly said he thinks is very impressive. So, of course, he's here to honor somebody who is a great friend to Ukraine, but also hoping to make some material gains with President Trump that could help his own war effort.
All right, Aidan, stand by. Let's bring back Torian Small, who is joining us from Capitol Hill to talk more as we start to see some of those dignitaries and world leaders filing into the Capitol Rotunda there. I think I see Senator Tim Scott, along with Senator John Barrasso, some of the leadership there of the United States Senate, Republicans all. So let's talk, Torian, about the senator's legacy. There are supporters of Senator Lindsey Graham, those who look back at his legacy and remember him as one of Congress's foremost national security experts, someone who was fiercely loyal to U.S. allies, including Ukraine, but also the state of Israel, and was influential, obviously, as serving as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate for strengthening the federal judiciary in the mold of the GOP, which is mostly what he did, but that he was also willing and effective at maintaining relationships with presidents of both parties and the other members across the aisle, specifically as it related back to his time when he and Senator John McCain, along with Senator Joe Lieberman, were seen as the three amigos. But then if you look at some of the criticisms of Lindsey Graham, one of the biggest ones is how he abandoned his earlier positions to support President Trump. We've all seen in the wake of his death the tweets and the things that he said about then candidate Donald Trump back in 2015. Others will see him as being overly interventionist in foreign affairs in the Republican Party now that wants to scale back foreign intervention. What are people in Congress saying to you in the conversations that you're having, not necessarily on camera, but in just gauging the temperature?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great biography of who he was as a lawmaker, who he was as a person, especially that critical point I think you made there about his support for Ukraine. It was at odds at several points with members of the House Freedom Caucus or the America First right-wing flank of the Republican Party. When President Trump was running for re-election, a large part of his orbit was among the idea that that they should separate themselves from these foreign conflicts. And, like you said, Graham was a part of holding true to that allyship.
All right, Torian, stay where you are. We're going to take a pause for a second and just watch Senator Graham's casket being unloaded and brought up to the Hill. All right, that was Senator Graham's body, of course, casket being draped in the American flag. We were watching it as it goes up to the rotunda. Once we get more pictures of the ceremony, we'll bring that to you. But right now, we want to bring in Lee Holmes, who joins us from Washington. He's the former chief counsel and staff director of the Senate Judiciary Committee for then Chairman Lindsey Graham. So, Lee, let's just start broad. You worked closely with the late senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Just tell us about that experience and what you're going to remember most about him.
Morning, Kelly. Thanks for having me. If I can just say first before we get to that, I was sitting here watching, and I think it's just so wonderful that he is getting this kind of recognition at the Capitol, later at the National Cathedral, and also in South Carolina. And it really is a testament to his influence here in D.C. and also all of the lives that he touched. And I saw a lot of his family standing there at the top of the steps. I also saw his most senior staff standing up there. So it was wonderful to see them all. As to working with him, he was the easiest to work with. He in a lot of ways, staffed himself. He knew the issues extraordinarily well, and he knew how to speak to people. I learned so much from him as a young attorney. He taught me to think about what was fair, who was right, who was wrong. He taught me to always let people make their case. And he taught me how to make a case that everybody would understand. And so, I'm just, it's a hard day, but I'm so grateful to have had the time with him. And that's where I'm trying to focus my attention.
Let's talk as we look here on the live images coming into us from the Capitol Rotunda, where, as you know, Lee, the Capitol Rotunda is one of the most sacred spaces in the United States, and often most Americans only see it during a State of the Union. But at a moment like this, it stops being a place of politics. It becomes a place of mourning, where both Republicans and Democrats and military leaders and officers, including we see the Vice President of the United States there, walk through and enter through those same doors. And for a brief moment, we will see politics suspended in Washington, and that is done intentionally for somebody like Lindsey Graham. But I also want to talk a little bit about his legacy, and one of the things that we were just talking about with our congressional reporter, Torian Small, was about his legacy as it relates to the things that he strongly believed. For example, a strong and robust American foreign policy, being strongly loyal to the countries that he considered to be America's closest allies, but oftentimes willing to, depending on how you look at it, some would say flip-flop to another position if that seemed to benefit him politically. Others would say that he was compromising. But how would you describe that contradiction in what we saw over the years as Senator Graham, during the years that he served in the United States Senate? Someone who was, on one hand, strongly loyal to the institutions that he valued, but yet also at times willing to go in a completely opposite direction if it seemed to be of benefit to him politically.
Yeah, I don't view him as having flip-flopped really at all. I think that he operated in the realm of the possible, and he never forgot his job, which was to represent the people of South Carolina. And to do that, you've got to work with the people that get into office. And so I think that he excelled at staying true to his principles and working with the environment in which the people of South Carolina and the people of the United States gave him. He was not going to throw the towel in because the political dynamics had changed. He was going to focus on what he could get done. And that's why his loss is so extraordinary.
I want to pick up on something that you said. You You don't want to throw the towel out, or towel in, rather. You want to work with the people in office. Something else that Vlad and I were discussing earlier was the senator's changing relationship with President Trump, being critical back in 2016, but becoming one of his closest allies. Was that then, hearing you describe him as someone who didn't want to throw in the towel, a choice of pragmatism or genuine persuasion over the time that the president is in office?
I think it was both pragmatism and also being responsive to the political moment. And the other story under there is the president and Lindsey developed a true friendship. And that friendship only grew over time, grew on the golf course, but it also grew professionally. And Lindsey became someone that the president could really rely on. And Lindsey, I also was able to move his priorities forward with the president because the president respected him and had that friendship with him.
Lee, stand by. I want to bring in, as we look now upon live pictures coming in to us of what is happening there in the Capitol. We will soon see the casket. There it is. You can see on your screen there of the casket of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. What is fascinating, and at this very solemn moment, as we watch him brought in, he will be placed on a simple wooden pedestal that was first used in the wake of the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. So it's a very sacred pedestal. It's simple wood, befitting this very solemn ceremony. Let's watch.
Would you pray with me? God of the ages, it is your almighty hand that guides our lives and directs our steps. Often it takes the suddenness of death to see how your divine love shapes and leads each one of us on life's journey. And in these moments of mourning, we necessarily take the time to give thanks for those whose lives have left a lasting and significant impact on us and on so many along the way. We invite your divine presence with us in this ceremony, that you would bless our efforts to honor appropriately the influence and effect Senator Lindsey Graham has had on each one gathered here and on this country and on the world. Give us eyes to see how you led a boy from central South Carolina through a life marked by personal hardship and legendary public service, placing upon him the mantle of leadership that Lindsey Graham bore faithfully and courageously for decades in service to this nation as airman, congressman, and senator. It was you, O Lord, who brought him through adversity, shaping within him an enduring sense of responsibility. It was you who, throughout his noteworthy career, equipped him with his assertive spirit, a force to be reckoned with, while also instilling in him a pragmatic determination to get things done, even when it required negotiating with the other side. It was you who emboldened him with both courage and grace, so that while many would know no tougher adversary, most would realize no better friend. And now, as this patriot rests from his labors and stands before you, may Lindsey Graham hear your own well done, good and faithful servant. It is in your eternal name we pray. Amen. Please be seated.
Senator Darlene Graham, members of the Graham family, Vice President Vance, Majority Leader Thune, and other distinguished guests. I'm incredibly honored to offer on behalf of the people of South Carolina our immeasurable gratitude for the statesman and even better friend, Senator Lindsey Graham. When people talk about Lindsey Graham, they often talk about the titles he has held: the congressman, the senator, the chairman, the colonel. But titles only tell a small part of the story. To truly understand Lindsey, you have to understand his deep love for South Carolina and his family, and his belief that public service is a responsibility, not simply a position. To say he loved South Carolina is an understatement. He loved every city in our small but very powerful state. And he always carried South Carolina traditions with him. He understood the people of our state, our independence, our values, our willingness to work hard, and our desire for leaders who will stand up for what they believe is right. Whether walking the streets of his hometown, meeting with locals, or representing South Carolina on the world stage, he never forgot where he came from. Like most South Carolinians, family meant everything to Lindsey. It drove his passion for service. It drove his fight for policy, and it kept him grounded. Here in Washington, a town where many lose sight of who sent them here and why they're here at all, Lindsey never forgot where he came from or who he was here to serve. What made Lindsey exceptional was his ability to work on difficult issues while maintaining personal relationships with people who disagreed with him. He believed that conversations mattered. He believed that showing up mattered. And he believed that leadership meant finding a way forward even when the path was complicated. And he was also very good at outsmarting the trolls, the armchair critics, and the keyboard warriors. Everyone can recount stories of Lindsey's quick wit, his unforgettable sense of humor, and his ability to make people laugh when you least expected it. He was authentic. He never tried to be someone he wasn't. A legacy is not built only through votes, legislation, or headlines. A legacy is built through the lives touched, the relationships formed, and the focused mission to make a difference over time. Lindsey Graham's legacy is one of service to South Carolina, to our nation, and to the cause of making the world a safer and better place. He spent his life standing for something larger than himself, and that commitment will continue to be remembered by those who had the privilege of knowing him and by generations who will benefit from his service. Perhaps what I'll remember most was his love for our military. Lindsey proudly served for 33 years in the United States Air Force, retiring as a colonel. He deeply understood the sacrifices made by the men and women who wear our nation's uniform because he wore it himself. I am the Congresswoman for the Upstate and a Lieutenant Colonel for the South Carolina Air National Guard. But Lindsey never missed an opportunity to remind me that he outranked me, not only in service, but also in his office in the upper chamber. And you know what? He had earned that right. He loved our service members, he loved our veterans, and he never stopped fighting for him. Just last week, I received a call from a friend that I had served with. He was a colonel, a pilot. He told me years ago he was on an aircraft and Senator Graham happened to be on that plane. He said he thought he never would get him out of the cockpit because he was right in the middle, almost the entire flight, talking to the pilots and learning more about them. That's just who Lindsey was. He wanted to be right there alongside our fighters and our veterans. I was proud to call Lindsey Graham my constituent and honored to have called him my friend. Service is not celebrity nor comfort, and public service is never accomplished by one person alone. Every member knows it takes a team. And he built one of the best teams who faithfully served alongside him. To every member of his Senate staff, both past and present, thank you for your service to Lindsey, to South Carolina, and the United States of America. Your professionalism, your loyalty, and your sacrifice and your loss is recognized. Having served under the Department of the Air Force, Lindsey and I both knew the Airman's Creed, which partly reads, "My mission is to fly, fight, and win." I am faithful to a proud heritage, a tradition of honor, and a legacy of valor. Those words describe Lindsey Graham's life. Through triumph and hardship, victory and criticism, a legacy of service. I remember so well one of my last joint events with Senator Graham. We shared a stage together at a church in our district to discuss our shared support for the people of Israel and to talk about our faith. Those were two topics that were very important to both of us. Senator Graham's death was unexpected. He had a full schedule. He had plans. And in this time of mourning, we're reminded of God's comfort and that His plan is perfect. None of us know when it's our time, but we're reminded that our only eternal hope is found in our Savior. As the Bible reads in the book of Romans, chapter 10, verse 13, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." To the Graham family, may God bless you and keep you. And may God continue to show each of us the grace that we do not deserve.
Mr. Vice President, Darlene, Senator Graham, Larry, members of the Graham family, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's difficult to believe that we're here today to say a final farewell to Lindsey as he leaves the Capitol for the last time. My heart is heavy. I feel his absence every day, and I know so many of my colleagues do as well. Senators on both sides of the aisle counted him as a friend. And Republicans and Democrats alike, including the Democrat leader, are here to say farewell. Lindsey was a towering figure here in the Senate and on the international stage. His leadership on national security and on our national defense is well known. I traveled with Lindsey all over the world as part of congressional delegations, and I saw firsthand just how much he was respected by our allies, and just how well he was able to connect with foreign leaders around the globe. Striking, too, was the instant connection he had with the military men and women that we met. They recognized him immediately as one of their own. Lindsey's work on these issues would be enough to cement his place as a leader in the Senate. But he was a leader on many other issues, too. As chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee in the 116th Congress, he fought tirelessly to advance well-qualified judges. He was serving as chair of the Budget Committee at the time of his death and was responsible for getting important tax relief legislation to the floor. And no tribute to Lindsey's work is complete without mentioning that he was a powerful voice for the pro-life movement. "Until my last breath, I will be fighting for this cause," he said. And he was. He was a fierce defender of Ukraine. He was a fierce defender of the unborn. And on the surface, these might seem like two completely separate issues. But it strikes me that in another way, they are both of a piece. In both cases, Lindsey Graham saw injustice, and he spoke up. And was as typical of Lindsey, he spoke up fearlessly. "I don't apologize for being pro-life," he said in an interview in 2022, and probably on a number of other occasions. It didn't matter to Lindsey whether an issue was popular or unpopular, whether he had the full support of his colleagues or whether he was standing alone. If he believed he was in the right, he spoke up. He told things the way he saw them, and he didn't mince words. But lest anyone think it was all work and no levity with Lindsey, let me just say that there was no one who took his job more seriously than Lindsey Graham. But also no one was more capable of cracking up a room. During the work week here in Washington, a lot of us are away from our families, so we often get together in groups for dinner. And let me tell you, Lindsey was always the first call. The conversation and the laughs always flowed at any meal where Lindsey Graham was present. He was entertaining always, and pretentious never. There are a lot of so-called self-made people in the world, he once said. I'm not one of them. My family, friends, neighbors, and my faith picked me up when I was down, believed in me when I had doubts. You made me the man I am today, he said. Ladies and gentlemen, Lindsey will be remembered as a senator and as a statesman. But for me, most of all, I will remember him as my friend. It's hard to think that there will be no more Senate dinners with Lindsey, that he won't be dropping by my office to discuss some piece of legislation or make me laugh with his witty commentary. But I cling to the same faith that Lindsey had, to the sure and certain hope of the resurrection and the knowledge that death is not the end. I am the resurrection and the life, says the Lord. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. To Darlene and the Graham family, to Lindsey's beloved staff members, be assured of the prayers of my wife Kimberly and I, and the prayers of so many in this room. And to Lindsey, rest in peace, my friend. I look forward to the days when you make us all laugh again.
Well, first to Darlene and to the Graham family, all of you, I know you loved Lindsey and were proud of him, and he was proud of you, and I'm very, very sorry. It's good to see you all here among his friends and his colleagues, and I also, of course, have to issue my condolences to them. I know so many of you loved Lindsey like I did. So many of you argued with Lindsey, laughed with Lindsey, relied on Lindsey, and I also, of course, want to give condolences to a group of people you sometimes don't hear as often mentioned in the same breath, but I know who loved him, which is his staff. I know all of you worked for him for a long time. Many of you worked for him for longer than, I've been in public service, certainly longer. Some of you even than I've been graduated from high school. Don't mean to age any of you, but what a testament to a man that he has so much loyal and devoted staff. I think that's the first thing I want to tell about Lindsey Graham. I want to tell some stories, but I also want to make an observation, which is that Lindsey Graham loved people from all walks of life. I think in part because of the way that he grew up, because of the fact that he wasn't handed everything. He was fascinated in everybody. He was fascinated in the wait staff in the Senate dining room. He was fascinated in the people who made the food. He was fascinated in the lowest staffer who had been hired 3 days earlier. He was fascinated by, of course, the very leadership of our country. And I think he was fascinated in people because he loved people and he was interested in them. He was the kind of guy who would walk into the Senate. And when he walked into the Senate, this was a guy who couldn't have stood more than 5'6" or 5'7", but he'd swashbuckle in with his jacket open like he was 6'5". He had an attitude to him, and it's one of the reasons why Lindsey Graham was Lindsey Graham. But he would walk into the United States Senate and he would slap you on the back. He would greet the person who served his food. He treated everybody the same because he was fascinated and he loved every single person in this chamber. And that's a great testament to the man. I first got to know Lindsey Graham when I was on the Senate campaign trail for my own Senate race in 2022. And I remember riding in the back of the car with him. During these campaigns, you go from one event to the next and to the next event. And I remember learning a lot from him. I had a lot of people who campaigned with me during that time, but I learned something from Lindsey Graham, the way that he interacted with people, the way that he was so interested in what was going on and what was moving people and what was motivating them and what they were interested in. That affection and love of people was obvious even on the campaign trail, but so too was Lindsey Graham's world-class sense of humor. And in one event in particular, we had just left one event, we were riding in the back of the car going to the next event. Lindsey Graham told me a story about his time in the House. And if I repeated exactly what he told me, Darlene, it would be the end of my political career forever. But what I can say is that I was laughing so hard that by the time we got to the next event, I had abdominal cramps and I was barely able to speak because Lindsey Graham could make anybody laugh and he could make anybody feel at home. I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, a person who didn't always agree with Lindsey Graham's politics just shortly after his death. And I expected the person maybe to say something critical, but he said, you know what? Even though we sometimes disagreed, I loved Lindsey Graham. It was impossible not to like him. That swashbuckling, infectious laugh, that attitude, that passion that so many others have talked about. Lindsey Graham was impossible not to like as a human being and, of course, as a United States Senator. I remember on that campaign trail where you're trying to raise money. And one of the ways that you raise money is you send people to your campaign website. And I said, Lindsey, before one of these Fox hits on the campaign trail, I said, Lindsey, could you maybe mention the website, jdvance.com? And over a 4-minute interview, he must have mentioned jdvance.com close to a dozen times. The host would ask, how was the weather? And Lindsey would say, well, before I check the weather, I always go to jdvance.com. And in a 4 or 5 minute TV appearance, Lindsey Graham raised us over $100,000. And that campaign stop was a critical part of me getting elected to the United States Senate and, of course, going on this incredible journey. That was who Lindsey Graham was. I remember once I got to the Senate, getting in this argument with Lindsey, and as John said, as Leader Thune said, he was a fierce defender of Ukraine, and he and I got into this intense argument at a Senate lunch. I think some of our colleagues probably remember this, about a funding bill for Ukraine. And I remember at the end of it going back to my staff, and I was at the time working on a rail legislation that I really, really cared about. And I remember going back to my staff and saying, well, that's probably the end of Lindsey's vote on the railway bill because he is never going to support anything I support after the argument that he and I just had. And of course, I found out a couple of weeks later from another Senate colleague that the fiercest advocate of that bill behind the scenes was Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, Lindsey was who he was, and I knew that Lindsey couldn't even pretend to care about rail policy. It was something I really cared about, but it wasn't something Lindsey was particularly focused on. And so I went to Lindsey and I said, why are you helping me? Why are you helping this legislation? And I expected him to do what so many politicians would do. I expected him to lie and say, well, I really care about rail legislation. And he said, oh, I don't care about that at all. I said, well, why are you helping me? And he said, well, I don't care about it, but you do. And that was the kind of colleague he could be, a person you argued with and fought with in 1 minute, but behind the scenes, without collecting an ounce of credit, was working for you and working for the things that you cared about in the next. That was who Lindsey Graham was. Before I knew Lindsey, one of the most enduring parts of his legacy is I do believe that Justice Kavanaugh would not be on the Supreme Court were it not for his fierce advocacy during a critical moment. Remember that Senate confirmation hearing where Lindsey, and by the way, he got criticism from the Republican side of the aisle for this. He would always vote for qualified Democrat judicial nominations. He came to the judicial nomination process in a spirit of bipartisanship. Again, he was criticized sometimes from our side of the aisle for that, but what he saw happening to Kavanaugh was not a policy disagreement, it was character assassination. And Lindsey got as fiery and as passionate as I have ever seen a human being get during a judicial confirmation, and I believe that he saved that nomination. Now, that moment, of course, went viral, but Lindsey didn't do it for social media clicks. He did it to do something at the very highest part of the Senate, which was to persuade his colleagues. And persuade his colleagues he did. I remember there were a few people who were waffling at that moment, a few people who were unsure what they were going to do. Lindsey didn't just earn a lot of headlines, he actually persuaded people. And that maybe is how I will choose most to remember my friend Lindsey Graham. He saw that the Senate, at its very worst, could be a venue for character assassination. But because he loved people, he saw that the Senate at its very best could be a deliberative body geared towards persuading people. And that's what Lindsey Graham did in that case and in so many others. So I choose to remember Lindsey Graham as a man who could disagree with you without being disagreeable. I choose to remember Lindsey Graham as a person who could fight with you on one issue but fight for you on another issue. I remember Lindsey Graham as a man who loved people. And because he loved people, he was willing to reason with them, to respect them, and ultimately to persuade them. May God comfort all of those who loved Lindsey Graham, particularly his beautiful family. And may God rest the soul of Senator Lindsey Graham, a true American original.
All right, you've been listening there to some very moving and eloquent speeches made by not only members of the clergy, but also the men who knew Lindsey Graham best, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who was before he was Vice President, a United States Senator, and Senator John Thune, perhaps no man closer to Lindsey Graham in the Senate. But there are Democrats who are there in that room. Kelly, as you pointed out to me, I was asking because my eyes are going, but I could see that you pointed out that the former President of the United States, Joe Biden, who served in the United States Senate alongside Lindsey Graham for many, many decades, as well as Senator Chuck Schumer, who has done the same. And we watched at that moment where Senator Graham's coffin was laid on that pedestal, that kataflak, they call it. Very simple wooden pedestal whose only rationale and reason for being here is it's just a very solemn piece of sacred wood. And then, of course, the color guard, the military honor guard that will maintain that silent vigil around the clock. No conversation, silence being part of the ceremony here as we watch
Control their minds with instinct fit. What time and venturing they quit. A firm security of land, grand steadfast side and skillful hand. Unlofting solitudes of states, of order and Smiling valley, and hear your rolling river. I long to see your smiling valley, where we're bound away across the wide Missouri. Tis so long years since last I shared
Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the inspiration of the life and legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham. We proclaim your generosity to this nation and world by giving us the gift of someone who sought to leave the world better than he found it. Inspired by his great life, teach us all to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, and to follow you more nearly each day. Continue to bless and keep us. Make your face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. Lift the light of your countenance upon us and give us your shalom, your wholeness your peace. We pray in the name of the Prince of Peace. Amen.
All right, you have been watching live pictures coming into us from the ceremony, the Capitol ceremony for the late United States Senator Lindsey Graham. We saw some very solemn moments, and as I was saying earlier, we saw speeches by the Vice President of the United States, along with the Senate Majority Leader Senator John Thune, who spoke very highly of their friend and colleague, the late Senator Lindsey Graham. This is, again, a very solemn moment. Lying in state generally is something that is only done for government officials, members of Congress, military leaders, unknown soldiers, and this moment is happening for Lindsey Graham. Let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, who's joining us live from Capitol Hill. And Caitlin, there was a touching moment there after all the speeches, after all the ceremony, when the late Senator Lindsey Graham's little sister reached over and touched his casket. And I'm reminded that of all the things that we've been talking about this hour over the life and legacy of Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the things that struck me is I recall him once saying that the greatest thing he'd ever done in his life was to take care of his little sister. Talk to me about that relationship.
That's right, Vlad. And now his little sister is a U.S. Senator. And it was such a touching moment there. If our audience may remember or may not know, Lindsey Graham's parents died when he was in his early 20s. His sister was a teenager, and he essentially adopted her and raised her. And she has been such a big part of his life and he in hers. She has appeared in campaign ads over the years discussing their relationship and the way in which, in her words, her big brother took care of her. And so now she has taken his place in the U.S. Senate and has been welcomed by his former colleagues. And it was just such a touching moment there, especially all of this pomp and circumstance, kind of remembering who he was. And Vlad, I couldn't help but think the last time many of his colleagues that you saw there saw Lindsey Graham was in these very hallways. There was such shock after his death. I remember talking to many senators shortly afterwards. They were just in utter disbelief, considering that Senator Graham had just been in Ukraine. He had been working on a lot of high-profile issues here in the Senate. And so you see his colleagues gathered there from both sides of the aisle. I was kind of going through and looking at all the Democrats that were there as well. And that really speaks to the way in which Senator Graham did work across the aisle. He was a loyal, staunch ally of President Trump, did everything in his power to push forward on Trump's policies, but he also had a lot of friends across the aisle. And because he was such a foreign policy influence, he took a lot of foreign trips with both Democrats and Republicans, and many of them remembered really growing close to Graham and working with him on a variety of different issues because of those codels, those foreign trips that they had spent time closely with him. So a very somber day here at the U.S. Capitol. I was kind of overwhelmed walking in here today, quite frankly, because there's a tight security perimeter across around the Capitol building. Harder to get in here today because there are so many high-profile people coming here. And also it was notable, guys, the way in which his staff was lined up outside the Capitol to welcome his casket in on the east side of the Capitol, back to the place that he was so fondly remembered here. And I can say over the past couple of weeks since his passing, it does feel like a different place. I mean, Lindsey Graham was someone who you could talk to anywhere in these halls. He was often walking by himself on his cell phone, not really flanked by a ton of staff or people kind of, in this bubble with him, but highly accessible to his colleagues and reporters alike. And so this moment today is a somber remembrance, but also one that a lot of his colleagues, guys, are still processing this.
And at a moment where there's so much political division, I think you're right to point out that he was someone that reached across the aisle. There were many moments in the speeches that we were just listening to where that was highlighted. Caitlin, appreciate it. Stay right where you are for us. I want to bring in Lee Holmes, joining us again from Washington. He's the former chief counsel and staff director of the Senate Judiciary Committee for then Chairman Lindsey Graham. Lee, I was struck in each of the speeches. I'm just going to read a couple quotes I jotted down. You had Representative Sherry Briggs. She said he knew that conversations mattered and that leadership meant finding a way forward. Then you heard Senator Majority Leader Thune say in dinner, when you were having a dinner, he was always the first person to call to get the conversation going, that it would always flow. And then Vice President Vance said that he, quote, actually persuaded people. And I was just struck listening to all of these speeches of how much conversation and his ability to use his words to get things done. Does that ring true for you in working with him?
Absolutely. He was always building relationships, keeping them. He had so many people's trust, especially in the Senate. And so all of that rings true. I thought it was a really wonderful ceremony. I think he would have loved it. He was not a particularly formal guy, but I think he would have liked the formal nature of this. That it's been brought up several times, the trips that he took, the Codels, with other members. And I remember on one Codel on which I accompanied him, he told me after a promotion ceremony for a military member stationed abroad, how important it was to do those in a formal way, to build the team, to honor and acknowledge people. And so I think the formality of this, particularly with the military carry-in, the body bearers, and all of the speakers here, there were other subtle formalities like Leader Thune speaking, and then of course the president of the Senate also speaking, more commonly known as the vice president, and they all did a wonderful job.
Lee, thank you very, very much for your recollection. It was a moment that I just saw there. I had to look closely to see, but Senator Lindsey Graham was able to get Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania to actually wear a suit to pay his respects. I had to do a sort of a double take and look very closely at my screen to see that. Just again shows you the kind of power and effect that he had on his fellow members of the United States Senate. Caitlin Huey-Burns reporting from Capitol Hill, Torian Small as well, Aiden Stretch, who also spoke with us earlier. Thank you very, very much. And as we see these senators paying their final respects to the Senator Lindsey Graham, let's just be reminded of this very solemn moment, the casket draped with that American flag. And Kelly, as you know, this isn't simply a patriotic decoration. In fact, the flag, as we know, represents our country, the nation, and it is temporarily embracing this casket, this person who graced the halls of the United States Senate and the Capitol building for so many years. The ceremony that we're watching and that we've seen unfold over the last hour or so says in effect that you belong to the American people during your life, and now the American people are here to honor you in death. And so this is a place where the speeches that we heard, there was no applause, there were no debates, just speeches, solemn words spoken by the people who knew him well and who loved him the most. We will continue to bring you coverage of this event throughout the day, including the Cathedral funeral service, which begins at 2 p.m. Eastern.
All right, that does it for us, but stay right where you are. Mugo Adigwe is live from San Francisco right now with our top stories.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day. And welcome in to our viewers. Ceremonies are underway on Capitol Hill to honor late South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. How he's being remembered and who is attending the funeral later today. Plus, President Trump meets with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. What we know about the closed-door meeting. And we are keeping an eye on the White House, where President Trump will also meet separately with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The war in Iran is expected to be a major talking point. But we begin with two wars and two leaders at the White House today. President Trump is holding Oval Office meetings, as we said, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the agenda, conflicts that so far have found no diplomatic solution. It will be Netanyahu's first meeting with Trump since the war with Iran started. For Zelensky, it is the second time he and Trump have met face-to-face this month. Let's go to the White House and CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, thank you for your time. So let's talk about the meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. What's at issue here as the war with Iran enters its sixth month?
Well, Mugo, it's good to be with you. Netanyahu actually just